Welcome to another episode in this summit series, The Quantum Human, Expanding Multi-Dimensional Awareness. And in this episode, we're working with quantum health tools. Welcome to another Mastery Empowerment Course introduction. Today we were with Jean Ang, and we're talking about the Arcturian Rainbow Transmission. This is a deep dive into color healing with the Arcturians. Hi, Jean. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Laura. Hi, everyone. Yes, looking forward to this deep dive with the different color frequencies, which is another way to look at the etheric and invisible world in a very profound manner.
Yeah, this is interesting. In our mastery empowerment courses with the Arcturians, we've done some things with colors and the integration, and it's always really interesting. But this is interesting. So there's 12 color bands, and that's interesting because it's more than just the rainbow colors. It brings in infrared and negative green. So I would like to have you start by sharing how you were inspired for this training, this transmission series.
Yeah, the usual understanding of the colors is what we call the visible colors, which is usually the rainbow or the seven colors. Maybe some people memorize it as Roy G. Biv. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And there's also a system where there's five so-called non-visible colors. So that would be the infrared, ultraviolet, black, white, and something that's called radiesthesia gray, or I use the word negative green. And the reason it's called negative green is it actually falls in between black and white. And these 12 colors can be mapped onto a circle or even a sphere. And if you see green as being at 12 o'clock on this circle, then negative green is actually at 6 o'clock in the mapping. So it's actually a polar opposite to green. So that's why it's called negative green. So it actually has nothing to do with the green color, nor is it negative in the sense of being bad. It just happens to be the polar opposite of the green band. But it's a very unique uh, color band that we can talk more about. One of its main characteristics is it carries transmissions or frequencies through space and time.
That is fascinating. And as you're speaking, we see your background image there, and it really is all of those colors as well. So when we're talking about healing with these colors, it carries information and frequencies, so we get to experience each of these. What do you know from your experience with the Arcturian healing transmissions that you offer that these colors offer us? I mean, is it typical of the rainbow colors as well and what they offer according to our chakras, or are you finding things a little bit different?
Yeah, like we were talking before, I'll provide a fairly extensive PDF that people can download to get a sense of the different characteristics of the different color bands. Some people who might have been doing different types of healing or their own study may have done a deep dive into colors, and maybe some of these non-visible colors will add to their study. But when we have the different colors, it's a way to tune our consciousness actually to certain frequencies that are very well known or innate to us just because of our exposure to visual colors in our sort of physical world. But when you're doing healing, when you imagine certain colors, you're actually changing the characteristic of the energy that you're transmitting. So, for example, if you were to send chi energy out of your hands or pranic energy out of your hands, and you imagine it being red in color, then it actually is altering the frequency that you're transmitting to the person. And that actually can change the way the energy works with the person. So red usually has a kind of a warming, energizing, even a passionate type of information. And then if you imagine a green color coming out of your hands, then you're actually shifting the energy characteristics that you're sharing with the person. And usually, green, much like we think of a forest or a plant, has very cleansing aspects to it. So once you start to work with colors, particularly with energy healing, as well as the higher dimensions, you begin to hone in on certain characteristics that are part of the different colors. So it's a way to really be very specific in the way we work. And as we've mapped these different 12 color bands, you can think of it as 12 ways to work with the energy world. And there's even further frameworks that break up those color bands into 12 sub bands. So then you're starting to work with a gradation of 144 different frequencies. But I didn't quite answer the direct question you asked about the Arcturians, but that's a little bit in their work with their colors. But that's a little bit of background on why a person might be interested in working with the color frequencies, particularly around healing or spiritual work.
And so colors also match sound frequencies. I find that fascinating. And so the can you explain how the frequencies of color work? Like, is a red color at the bottom of the rainbow, the beginning of the rainbow, a slower wavelength, and then each other color is an octave of that frequency? Is it something like that? How do you understand that?
Mhm. Yeah, so the red would actually be the, well, actually infrared would probably be the slowest in terms of the frequency of the 12 colors. And then as you're going up in the different colors, starting with infrared, moving to ultraviolet, you're moving to higher frequency colors. And they all each have a characteristic or a quality to them. And then in terms of octaves, you could then move to, infrared again, but at another higher octave. And usually you're shifting into another dimension. So you may go from the physical, like a physical color of red. And then when you go to the next octave, maybe you're now in the etheric dimension. And then the next octave of red above that would be in the emotional dimension, and then you can continue onwards. And we're usually using a seven-dimensional model. So eventually you're at a very subtle layer that even though you're still working with red, you might be at like six dimensions up, which would be the spiritual in the framework that we've been using of the seven dimensions. And they still all retain a certain quality to them. So when I mentioned passion for red, that might be more an emotional or mental quality of red. So we're probably talking about a little higher octave. Then it's warming quality when you project like red out of your hands, and a person might receive kind of warmth. They're probably feeling that at the physical or etheric dimension. So that would be at sort of a lower octave than maybe the passion, which is starting to move into a more an emotional quality. So sort of another octave above the etheric and two octaves above the physical. And the Arcturians is consciousness is just another filter in terms of an intelligence that can use these different colors. And a lot of people who see in colors clairvoyantly or move in other dimensions out of body usually see colors even in a more brighter or refined manner than what we see in the physical. So, spiritual beings who exist at other dimensions may actually be using these colors even in a more refined manner than what we actually see in the physical world.
Wow, that brings to mind the rays, like the 12 rays of creation. Do you know if these are related to the 12 rays of creation, or are they different slightly?
Yes, there may be actually some aspect of the 12 rays. I know those also have a very specific characteristic. Like there's the ray, the one that I was thinking of is the one that Alice Bailey through Master DK brought through, kind of describing a certain spiritual aspirant's path. Like there was a ray for love, a ray for service, a ray for kind of occult knowledge, a ray for leadership. And these probably also map onto a color scheme that carry certain frequencies or characteristics. So the colors could actually be seen as something that's non-visible, another way to describe characteristics of something, and is like a map that we can use to help us navigate these different characteristics.
Okay, very cool. It's very interesting to know that there's beings that use these colors. And so when we hear channels, they'll say that they're working with a green ray collective or a blue ray collective. So that's very interesting. So this is actually helping us expand consciousness as well. Colors are multidimensional. So as we tune to these frequencies and explore these frequencies, we'll be able to recognize more of our own multidimensionality as well. Is that how you interpret this? And then how would we use that for manifesting and creating a beautiful life?
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. It's sort of like being able to have a more refined, a precise way to focus your consciousness. So if someone was trying to energize, let's say, a thought form, maybe they wanted to manifest more abundance in their business, you could send energy to that, and if you were just had a model of sending energy, maybe you would, on the physical level, start doing certain things in the physical world to bring that business, into manifestation. If you had a model of working with subtle energies, maybe you would energize that thought form with prana. And in this case, because one wasn't necessarily working with frequency or color model, you would just send energy maybe out of your hands to energize this particular thought form. But if you had a color model and you understood what those frequencies represent, you could tune your consciousness into a color that actually is much more accurate in terms of having the characteristics of manifestation. And so those in particular would be infrared and red. There's a lot of different research that's done on those etheric qualities, and they have a lot to do with taking something from the astral or emotional mental world and condensing it down into the physical world. So then you're becoming much more precise in how you're using your energy, and this allows you to tune your consciousness. So then you could use red or infrared to manifest a thought form faster because you're not using other colors that may not have so much to do with that characteristic. Whereas in the example of healing, if you're trying to clear, let's say, a chakra or an energy center, using red would be somewhat helpful, but it's not exactly the main characteristic of red. If you tuned your consciousness to imagine or see the frequency of green or violet, you would clean that chakra or channel much faster because of the qualities of that frequency. So, really, we're starting to be much more refined in both our actions as well as our perceptions.
Okay, very cool. So in this 3 days that we're going to do together with our group, we invite those watching and listening to join us because these are really beautiful experiences. And again, the group energy enhances it for everyone, the experience for everyone. So when we receive these transmissions, tell us about what's going to go on each day and what we're going to do. Is it a transmission that's going to work with all of our subtle bodies, the 7 subtle bodies as well? So more of our multidimensional selves.
Yeah, exactly. And another way to think about, when you're starting to use the framework of colors is I was describing how you might use it to energize or manipulate or change something. But it's also people might be clairvoyant or perceive in colors. So an example of that is, let's say you don't perceive in colors yet, and but you do sense energies, let's say with your vision. So someone approaches you, someone you know, and it just looks like their energy, the framework you have is whether it's intense or not intense, let's say like a weak energy or strong energy. And you see this person has seems to be brighter or more intense, but you can't see colors yet. So all you could really say is that this person's energy field is stronger. But let's say you could see at least the first seven visible colors clairvoyantly, and you see that their energy field is filled with a lot, is very intense, strong, but filled with a lot of red. So then, depending on sort of the hue of the red, you may say that they may like you a lot. It might be passionate. They also might be angry at you because when you're angry, you tend to emanate red, usually in a very dark version of red because of that quality of anger, having more of that frequency. So now you're much more refined in terms of how you can perceive someone's frequency because we also emanate emotionally and mentally, like we were talking about the octaves, in certain frequencies of color is how someone might perceive that. So someone then was very intense, but they were emanating violet or indigo light. You might think, oh, this person actually just had a very strong spiritual experience. So now you're much more refined. Whereas before, you might only be able to say they're just more energized, more intense. Here you may be able now to able either to say it was an intense spiritual experience, or if it was more red on the red spectrum, but more maybe they're more angry or passionate, depending on the hue of the color. So again, it also refines our perception of reality, much like in the physical world. If we could only, for people who might be colorblind, they can still function in the world, much like the person who can only see intensity in the energy world. But with color, we can see much more information, let's say in the physical world versus someone who might not be able to see colors in the physical world.
All right, so this is going to be a nice exploration and experience of feeling into those color frequencies. Really cool. As you're talking there, what the common world, the collective understands about colors. Let's talk about insurance companies. Like they know if you have a red car, especially if you're a younger person, just with your new driver's license and you have a red car, you're going to pay higher insurance costs for that. Why is that? Is that because we tend to naturally, like, if we drive a red car, that we're going to be a little bit more aggressive, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a very interesting kind of case example if we use this multidimensional model. There's a number of things. The chakras are actually also predominantly a certain color. And there's, of course, many different models, but in general, the lower chakras, particularly the basic or root chakra, starting to move to the second or sacral chakra, are filled with red. Now, red, those chakras have a lot to do with energizing the physical world. So there's a couple of things that might be going on with someone who buys a red car. First, their lower chakras actually might be quite strong. That's why they're interested in buying a red car. Whereas someone who, let's say, is more focused or their predominant chakras, let's say their crown chakra, which is a more violet color, it pretty much maps red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, sort of from lower chakra to higher chakra in general. So that person might not, if they're more, have a bigger crown chakra than root chakra, might not be, let's say, subconsciously attracted to a red car. They might get something more like a violet. That quality of violet tends to be a little bit more spiritual, more maybe calm, maybe more balanced, whereas the red is very energizing in general. So a person who sort of has more red in their field and who would be gravitating to expressing that in the color of the car is probably going to want to drive faster and drive more aggressively in general because that is the vibration of red. So now insurance companies know that whether they know about the energy world, they know what happens in the physical world. So there's probably a back and forth between what the person emanates as well as kind of what other people think about red. So that would be including police people are probably going to look to people who drive red cars, probably are usually driving a lot faster because they themselves are a little bit more on the aggressive spectrum, or they wouldn't have bought that color.
Yes. Okay. Fascinating. Interesting. All right. Well, I guess the world is catching up with the energy work here of the colors. Let's talk about some of these other colors because, we have the seven colors, Roy G. Biv, and then we get to ultraviolet. And ultraviolet, there's even a new violet flame that has more of the lavender. And so ultraviolet, in my sense, it has a little bit more of a lavender color with it. Can you explain ultraviolet and what is happening with ultraviolet light colors?
Yeah, the two that are very related, of course, are violet and ultraviolet. Maybe by saying a couple of the differences, people can refine that aspect. And just as a quick review, so violet is it tends to be spiritual, and then ultraviolet, just in terms of numbers, is a little bit of a higher frequency than violet. It gets a little bit faster on the physical plane, so that we don't actually see it, at least consciously. That's why it has that ultra term. And you can use, of course, devices to see ultraviolet, the physical wavelength. And then, of course, this works on the other octaves. So usually you're talking about an even, one very basic way is even a more subtle, refined spiritual frequency when you go to ultraviolet. And usually violet and ultraviolet are associated with very spiritual type beings. Like we have Saint Germain and the Violet Flame, Holy Master, very high consciousness and frequency. And then you also think of angelic beings when you have violet or ultraviolet in the atmosphere, in the etheric or astral atmosphere. Angelic beings can kind of really match that. So they tend to come to those areas. So if you wanted to create like a healing space or a healing room or your house to attract or even house angelic beings, you'd probably use a lot of violet and ultraviolet frequencies or vibrations, and even kind of lavender type smells, which is another octave of similar characteristics. And then those beings tend to be very easily, it's like they're swimming in their environment. And then the other quality of ultraviolet, this was more from the prana healing system, which has a quite in-depth color frequency, mostly with pranas, is ultraviolet has a kind of a divine intelligence to it compared to violet. So it will seek out, healing with its own divine intelligence, whereas violet still needs sort of the consciousness of the healer to direct that frequency. So it's even like a higher level again of consciousness over or in addition to the violet characteristics.
Wow, that's fascinating. Really, really cool. We want to talk about a free gift for all of our listeners that go more into these colors and explains these colors. It's really fascinating. And, when we're thinking about the ultraviolet light, and we see that it's almost like scalar energy. If it knows where to go, I'm just sensing that it could be almost like scalar energy. It's beyond physical reality, right? Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Like in the pranic healing system, when you want to create violet, you imagine violet energy coming out of your hand, like light coming out of your hand. You just tune it with your consciousness in terms of the colors. So you imagine violet, and then you focus on your crown chakra because that's like the input, because your crown has a lot of violet color in it already. So the chi comes in through your crown and then out your hand. But if you want to create ultraviolet, or they call it electric violet in pranic healing, you imagine like a blowtorch. When you see a blowtorch, the middle of the flame has that kind of violet color, the electric type of violet. So you imagine sort of a very bright white core coming out of your hand, and then on the rim, you imagine that electric violet color, the same as the blowtorch. But what they said is your upper pillar has to be somewhat developed in order to be able to generate that electric violet light. So you actually have to be able to pull like a higher spiritual reality, like you were mentioning about the non-visible sort of scalar wave type similarities, in order for a person to generate that ultraviolet light. So it's interesting to understand the mechanism of how someone creates that type of colored prana, violet versus electric violet, because it also explains like where that energy might be coming from, sort of higher dimensional planes for the electric violet or ultraviolet light.
Okay, very cool. And there's the other colors that are included. Let's talk a little bit about black and white,
Mhm.
because we know that white is all the colors, and then black is none of the colors, or what is that? Help us with this.
Mhm. Yeah, black is actually a very fascinating color. It's very absorptive of all frequencies. So a lot of uses of black one of the healing uses is that it can absorb particularly detrimental energies. So you might use, for example, a crystal that has a black vibration. So you're thinking of like black obsidian, could be smoky quartz, could be black tourmaline. And you can actually ask the crystal, or instruct it is the term, to absorb like detrimental energies that might be coming into your own energy field. It could be directed to a dark crystal that has a black vibration. And it sort of takes the hit, so to speak, rather than your own field. So black has a very absorptive quality that can be used for healing. It also represents the void or emptiness, or even the womb of creation. So when we kind of start to think of darkness or darkness visible, we tend to think of black, but it doesn't mean we don't exist. It just means we actually exist in a allness or a void state, which is kind of getting closer to what ultimate reality is. So black has a lot of deep spiritual connotations, and maybe has been associated a little bit with some negative connotations just because of darkness or the night, but actually is a lot of healing qualities and characteristics that can be used.
Yeah, I'm recalling a memory of I was on a trip and with some other people, and this other person in our group, we kind of had a little exchange as we were not so friendly with each other. And I picked up a black obsidian crystal, and the feeling that was negative between us totally dissolved and dismissed. And it was really because of the black. So that is really wonderful how that really does diminish or absorb. So we can use these colors in that way in our lives. So we're going to learn all about that. It's really fascinating. So white then, white is all the colors. And that's like, again, almost a spiritual color as well. Like when we go and do ceremony, we're often asked, like shamans want us to wear white, and there's a reason behind that.
Exactly. Like white has the purity aspect, like white as snow, the innocence, but also has all the qualities and characteristics. So when doing healing, if a person, has learned the different colors and are not sure which color to actually use, you can always safely use white. It's almost like the universal intelligence will find whichever frequency is needed if you're presenting white to a system. So it has this quality of the allness, and also lets through whatever is coming through. So that's usually why, like in a spiritual or religious ceremony, you may be asked to, wear white so that the spiritual energy is not blocked in any way that's coming through. It comes through purely. It also is reflective. Again, it's very interesting, the insurance example that you brought up. really hones in that people subconsciously are attracted to certain colors, maybe because those certain chakras which have those colors are predominant in them. So if they don't know anything about the chakras and what's in each of them, like I said, someone who's maybe very tends to be aggressive, tends to like speed, like a adrenaline type, their lower chakras are probably going to be very strong and big. So they would probably maybe subconsciously be attracted to something like red or the reds, orange, and yellows. But then we can also harness that characteristic. So red is also, like I said, very close to the physical world. So you'll see, like speaking of tomorrow is Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year. They like to use red and gold, and red is the both for wealth and prosperity. So if you wanted to try to make things a certain way, then you can choose those colors, and that's usually why like in Lunar New Year or Chinese New Year's, they tend to focus on those colors that bring in wealth and prosperity, which is red and gold.
Yes, and the little red envelopes filled with money, magic money.
Oh,
And the feng shui of making your door red, allowing the red door. So that's really cool. Okay. Well, we are looking forward to exploring with all of these colors and feeling these frequencies. It has me looking at my favorite color, and so a person's favorite color does speak a lot about that person. And so we're going to explore all of this and get to feel those frequencies. And I mentioned earlier the free gift that you have for anyone watching. They don't have to be a part of the course, but it's a PDF booklet of more on these colors. Tell us in just a moment, tell us briefly about that PDF book download.
yeah, it's a fairly extensive summary of all the 12 colors. So if people wanted to, we just kind of scratched the surface in terms of what those characteristics are. And it's a little bit like a code book. I think a lot of people have studied colors already. But once you have those frequencies, like we were mentioning here, it's both a way to perceive the world and particularly clairvoyantly in a much more refined manner. You have a much more larger palette of characteristics that you can perceive, as well as it's a much more refined way to manipulate energy or to change the energy world, therefore other dimensions, including the physical world. Like how you can use violet rather than go, let's say red, to maybe inspire more of a spiritual characteristic. And then there's some unique colors that are not listed in there, but that we'll talk about, like magenta. Magenta is actually a unique color because it's actually red and violet mixed. So it's sort of like the two ends of the spectrum. So when you use magenta, you're sort of combining both the best of sort of the physical as well as the spiritual world. But yeah, I think people will really enjoy that summary. It might be something you can either add to your library, or it'll be a good sort of summary of what we're going to be doing in this series. And then just to answer your question, because I know I sort of didn't really directly answer it, but so what do the Arcturians have to do with the colors? And I think what's happening here is, since we're in the energy of the Arcturians, they kind of bring their own perspective and intelligence. So we kind of get a information download. And I know we've been talking about like classrooms in the astral world that happen at night a lot of times in these mastery empowerment classes. So we're a little bit like one of our instructors, not the only one, energetically will be the Arcturians and sort of how they use these different colors.
Okay, beautiful. One thing that I find fascinating when you were talking about magenta is that people on a spiritual journey, their own ascension journey, often will start to visualize the magenta color. And it's an indicator of they're accessing another realm, like another spiritual step. It's quite beautiful. It's significant. So that's fascinating. And so if it's both the red and the violet together, it's almost like the circle where the ends meet. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. And another way to think of the colors are like the codes. Spiritual beings can communicate to us in codes, and codes that Of course, geometries is one way to do encoding transmissions. Maybe a fundamental way spiritual beings transmit codes. But the other way is through color.
Tell us about the image behind you.
Oh yeah, this is so I asked the Arcturians for a symbol that would allow us to communicate with them either through a type of like journeying experience or even just through resonance when you see the symbol. So this is actually what I is the symbol that the Arcturians gave me, and then an artist, I asked them to paint or draw this symbol. So it's called the Arcturian Stargate, and that was a symbol they gave me. And it's basically made up of like three major sort of geometries. One you can see is the triangle, and then it circumscribes the sphere or the circle. And then this sort of wavy line that's kind of coming out, that was also part of the original Stargate symbol. It's like a wavy line inside the sphere.
All right, thank you. We can feel the energy and the vibration from that Arcturian Stargate symbol. All right. Well, we invite everyone to participate with us in this beautiful series. It's so fun and enriching to join together in this way. And it's all recorded. If you can't make it live, you can still be part of it. I love it because it's quantum and it's outside of time and space where we're even beginning to have dreams even before we begin. And then during the 3 sessions, the dream space is pretty active for most people. And that's really fascinating to witness and hear people sharing their stories. So we invite everyone to join us. And we have a bonus item. It is building the immortal body of light, which really talked about this more the rainbow body of light that we have, and so that's fitting for this. Do you want to share anything about that bonus?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. People might start to dream, and particularly if you start to dream in colors that you remember, that might be a way that the spiritual realities or beings are coding or sending information to you now in a language that's very familiar to us because we, of course, see things in colors. But all those different octaves are another more subtle way to transmit information through these same frequencies. So one might also think of the colors without the visible level of the colors, but think of them as the characteristics that you might be able to read about in that PDF booklet. So almost like a non-visible way of working with color bands. And then the immortal body of light, yes, it's another way. Sometimes people see their astral body filled with colors. And like I mentioned, the hue tends to tell us kind of almost on the emotional mental level. So when your astral body or this kind of immortal body of light is filled with a lot of bright colors, it really doesn't even matter what the color is, as some teachers say. It's just the brightness and the clarity when it's very clear. Usually it's a very positive direction. We're thinking clearly, we're feeling very joyful, very happy, very positive. Then that frequency, which could be seen as a color for some people or represented as a color in the astral world, tends to be very bright and clear. So this is also a way to develop what's called the immortal body, is that astral body of light filled with different vibrations or colors.
All right, very good. Thank you for that. So we're ready to take a spiritual journey with colors and meet the beings that are on each of these color bands as well that can be working with us. So let's take a quick moment and explore a frequency as an example. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think since we were discussing it, maybe we'll experience the ultraviolet color band according to the Arcturians, so you can kind of see what that feels like through their filter, through their consciousness. Okay, and one of the things that you did mention, which is another way you can see, the color bands could actually be seen as unique spiritual consciousness or spiritual beings. Okay, so you can just relax and just see what you feel or feel what you see. So we're activating the Arcturian ultraviolet color band. And usually this is considered the atmosphere of the angels. So if you had any spiritual intentions, actually any intention, healing, manifestation, you can state that and have these energies help to manifest or bring that through at any dimensions, particularly the higher dimensions. Also, if you're doing any higher dimensional work, such as accessing your Akashic record field or past, future, and parallel lives, or even traveling along different timelines, these higher frequencies, like the ultraviolet, can assist in that process. Finally, when your field is bathed with such a high frequency energy, you may have access to certain spiritual masters or beings, so it can help in the communication, for example, with the seraphim, the highest of the spiritual hierarchy. And finally, you may actually see a type of electric violet or high frequency violet light imbuing your energy field, and even tune into how the Arcturians and their consciousness filter affects the overall perception of the ultraviolet. We'll just take a few more moments to actually let the frequency integrate into your energy field so it becomes more of a lasting memory or impression so that you can recall the ultraviolet fairly quickly just by either how you perceived it in your mind's eye or even just the word or your clear intention to bring it back in your field. That completes the exposure to the Arcturian ultraviolet wavelength. And you can gently come back to your physical body now. When you feel comfortable, you can open your eyes and snap your fingers.
Wow, thank you, thank you, thank you for that beautiful transmission of the ultraviolet flame. Just I know it's different and unique for everyone, but just to share briefly, it's so supportive, that supportive, um, loving, calm, and peaceful. And at one point, even before you mentioned the angelic realm, I did see just a big being. And then you mentioned seraphim, and it's like, wow, perhaps that's what it was. It was, and again, that's why I use that word support, because it's very supportive. And then thinking about timelines and how we can heal even things in our physical reality from emotions and feelings that we have. That's why I use that word very supportive, and very supportive in creating fresh timelines based on love and joy and happiness. So really exquisite, wonderful. And the memory of that. I could actually, towards the end, I could actually start to hear the ultraviolet color. I could hear it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, you can think of colors also as a way to communicate to spiritual beings. Like we think maybe we would talk to them in a language, but it may be even closer to imagine certain colors or combinations of colors as a way to speak to spiritual beings.
All right, beautiful. Well, we are really looking forward to this course, and we invite everyone to join us and get signed up. And as soon as you sign up, you're going to be already in our group energy, and we look forward to seeing you there. Jean, thank you so much for this. We really look forward to it and appreciate this. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. See you there.
This has been a presentation of New Earth One Network, your home for New Earth living. Access information, education, and videos on living from the heart in unity consciousness. Visit newearth1.com.